Judge, I want to thank you for just your willingness to be here and to be a part of this conversation, really important conversation for us and for our church.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. I've been in Fort Wayne since 1990, and I started out as a youth pastor on the southeast side of town, and we had some of the group homes who were part of our little youth community was there. And I remember at that time you were serving certainly in family court, but also as a referee. I don't know if that's what you still do or not. But every so often, one of the students in our ministry would find themselves getting into a little bit of trouble, and they would find themselves in your room. And I remember the first few times walking in there and watching how you handled the situation at times with a great degree of firmness. At times, really, I think probably having to be maybe the dad figure in all this. I don't know if that was the case or not. And times walking out thinking to myself, man, that was tough. That guy was really hard on those kids. And then I remember a time where that happened, I think, on a Monday or Tuesday. And then I think it was like on a Thursday, I found myself back into your courtroom dealing with the same child as it relates to their care and seeing this incredible depth of compassion and concern. Yeah. And I thought, I get it. I developed just an immediate respect for you for all these years and been watching you from obviously at times being even in this space on a couple occasions with families. And I just want to commend you for just job well done. Yeah. I know we were looking at your courtroom, and your room's different than any of the others, isn't it?
Yeah, we try to, we're modeling a process or a way of doing court for families that came out of actually Arizona. We just did a lot of time of researching of what the best way to work and for families that God brings us on a daily basis. And we recognize that the people that come in here are in need of care and in need of ministry, and we don't need to add to their anguish. We don't need to add to their stress. I mean, they're already over the top because of their circumstances in many instances. And sometimes those circumstances aren't completely of their making. And so what we try to do is reduce the adversarial nature of the process. So when a child comes in with a family or just the parents on an abuse or neglect situation, we begin with a mediation process where we invite them to bring their extended family members, pastoral care providers, or others that may be supportive, as well as the attorneys and all of the service providers, to sit in a separate room and walk through the circumstances of their situation and what the remedies might look like. And then they come into this room, and instead of having adversarial tables like one would see in a normal courtroom, it's a semicircle where everybody gathers together around a table to share the conversation with the court. And the idea is that we're working together as a team and not against. If one pictures the more traditional kind of doing work, you have a mother that may be struggling with addictions, and she comes in and she sits on one side of the table, and maybe she has an attorney, maybe she doesn't. And then you have all of the other service providers and everybody else, because they all know each other. They sit on the other side of the aisle, and they go through the process of telling this woman all of her errors and the mistakes in her life. And then after they get done tearing her down, then we say, we're here to help you, please trust us. So, I mean, that's a bit of a broad brush, and it wasn't that no one was caring and knowing was not doing their job. It was really more of a situation in which the system wasn't correct for what we were trying to accomplish. And so after a lot of research involving a lot of different people that know more than I'll ever know about how to reach out and touch the lives of families, we changed this process. And the idea is to have a less traumatic and more inclusive environment when we're dealing with parents that are struggling with addictions, parents that are struggling with situations that brought their children in and caused them to be removed from their care, either temporarily or on a longer term. So the idea, and to bring about an opportunity for them to understand that that they have to name the situation that they're in and identify it as a problem, and then help them understand that there is hope and that there is a resolution. So, and we have to begin there, I think, on a moral basis. That's where we have to start every case.
You know, you said something, a couple things in your explanation there. One is you said who God brings our way, and that the opportunity to minister to that family, that as a judge, how does your faith interact with what you do?
Well, I'm very active in my church. I go to Emmanuel Lutheran, and my wife and I, we raised our kids through parochial school education all the way through Concordia and on. It is my firm belief that we are all called into our vocations, that God places us. And that doesn't mean that by some sort of divine right, I'm judge. I don't want to make that. But I think God puts us all into situations using our talents and gifts, because He gives the whole body of Christ gifts and talents according to their ability and needs that He ordains, and then brings us all together so that we can reach out and minister to one another. And so the person that comes in here is someone that I believe is my responsibility to use my area of vocation to respond in a ministry fashion to them. That's my responsibility. God has placed me here for that purpose. And the person that's coming is really in many ways, even though they come with extraordinary challenges, are a gift, because they are coming into a system where now we can take some action to help protect the children and help give them some things that they may have not have been able to acquire or access before. So it's really an understanding that everybody that's here is part of the body of Christ, working together and reaching out in an aid fashion for those that oftentimes find themselves in some depths of despair, or depths of addiction, or depths of mental illness, all of the different challenges that people encounter.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about just the whole foster. Our focus this weekend is really on the foster care piece as well. And what do you see as the current challenges in our city as it relates to?
I think the primary case, our caseload is exploding in terms of child abuse and neglect cases. I think the average person in the community would be shocked by what we're seeing in this community. And this community is an extraordinarily good community. There's a wealth of services, there's a wealth of positive people, there's a wealth of church-led ministries, there's a wealth of professionals here that I would challenge any city to try to match. I think we're a gem in the Midwest.
I agree.
I really believe that to be true. But that being stated, I think the average person that goes to their jobs and goes to their responsibilities aren't aware of some of the things that happen. If one looks at a map of the city of Fort Wayne and Allen County and sees where all of the spots are that there have been an opioid overdose, you would see a map that's almost black with dots. There's no particular neighborhood that's got a higher concentration of the other. And so that's causing an increase. We have had multiple cases this year in which the mother and or the father have died as a result of opioid abuse and ultimately an overdose that have killed them. We've had an increase in our numbers that are significant. In October, we had the number of our new cases that are coming in exceeded all of the cases that came in 2016. So we're well above the numbers in 2016. And they're complicated cases. They're cases involving primarily issues dealing with addictions, some methamphetamine, a lot of opioid issues, some issues with regard to children being born with marijuana and the meconium. But we're also seeing a lot of issues associated with mental illness. I don't know how much of the drug abuse issues are really self-medicated mental health issues. That's really hard to discern when we see them because they're in such a depth of crisis. So I would articulate that most of our caseload is either a significant and chronic mental health issue that is not receiving the kind of care that the person needs, or drug abuse.
I think I heard that we're up to close to 600 children or placements at this point.
No, we're well over 700 cases.
Wow.
And so 700 cases usually means multiple children.
Yeah.
So we're probably closer to 1,000 to 1,200 kids. So because most cases has more than one child in it.
How many of those kids are not? Do you know how many of those kids are not placed in foster care?
We work very, very hard to find relative placements for most of those kids for multiple reasons. The children are already experiencing trauma.
Right.
To go into a home that is completely foreign to them is another associated trauma. So we try to find relatives that are appropriate. And the old adage that an apple doesn't fall far from the tree is kind of a myth. We find in many, many instances wonderful families that this particular daughter or son has an opioid or a problem. And oftentimes the grandparents aren't able to break that glass shield that they put around themselves in order to protect their grandkids, because if they push too hard, the grandkids and mom and dad can disappear. And so they walk on eggshells. Well, once the court's involved, we can break that barrier so that we can open the doors to get aunts and uncles and grandparents involved. And oftentimes they can become licensed as licensed foster care parents in order to help offset the cost associated with the care of additional children into the home. But that being said, not every case is a case that has appropriate relatives available. And so there's always an increased need for licensed foster care. And it's a terribly important job. And multiple agencies in town provide training and licensure processes to become a foster parent.
Mm-hmm. Why would you say it would be important for a family of faith to consider stepping into a role of foster care?
Well, I think a family of faith already understands Christ's compassion and calling for them. And I think that's important. To understand Christ is to understand and to have empathy, and to understand that this approach to a child has to be completely different. And I think so that compassion that's going to come through a person of faith is important for the child to see and experience. I think having a family that's dependable, consistent, unconditional love, structure, are things that many of these children never experience. And it's a complete shock for many of these kids because they don't understand all of what I just said exists in many instances. And once they acclimate to a structured environment, once they acclimate to a nurturing environment where there's going to be food on the table, where there's going to be expectations and standards, where there's going to be love, and a new understanding of love, that love can mean discipline, but love can mean discipline with nurturance, is something that is extraordinarily important in the lives of these kids. And I've seen kids that, while we're working to help and assist the parents, just flourish in a way that they've never flourished before. And it's a great measure for us in a court to be able to observe these children in a foster home and see, these children overcome multiple challenges, to overcome multiple developmental delays, for example, because of they're receiving the kind of parenting care. And that's also a challenge for when the parents observe that, because it forces a reality to them that they may not have experienced in the past.
Which actually could be helpful to that,
Sure.
to those parents.
To the person that is getting and open to the right kind of care, if they're able to see, look, this is how these kinds of parental responses aid my child, whom I love, then maybe that suggests something to me in terms of my behavior.
What do you say to the individual or the couple, the family that's out there, the individual, the couple that's out there, that they're at a place in their life where foster care is not going to be an option for them? Are there other ways that you would encourage them to interact with the challenges of what we're being faced with within our city?
We have a great program called the Court Appointed Special Advocate Program, which is CASA. And they're always looking for volunteers. And the CASA volunteer is specially trained through a series of lectures and interactions over the course of the period of several weeks. And once trained, they're assigned to a case. And in Indiana, we either have to have a guardian ad litem, an attorney representing the best interest of the child, or we have to have a court-appointed special advocate for the child. And that person is charged with the responsibility of reviewing the case, reviewing what's going on in the case, reviewing the child's placement, reviewing how the child is doing, meeting with the child, meeting with the caregivers, meeting with the parents, and then advising the court as to whether or not the child's best interests are being served and what in the future should be the child's best interest. That's an extremely important job. The attorneys that we hire as guardian ad litems when we don't have enough CASA volunteers do a great job. I don't want to take anything away from what the work that they do, but they don't have the time, nor do I have it in my budget to pay them to go out and visit the homes and go talk to the teachers and do those kinds of things that are necessary to get a good handle and a good picture of what's happening in the life of that particular child. And there's lots of nuances that come about as a result of CASA. CASA isn't necessarily an adversarial position juxtaposed against the Department of Child Services or the parent. It really is taking an independent, objective view in a very caring way of what this child needs, and being able to articulate that in a way that's understandable to both the parent and to the court, so that we can take the appropriate action and make sure that that child gets the care that they need. Sometimes it's missed. It's important that case managers are overwhelmed with work, the attorneys are overwhelmed with work, the parents are overwhelmed with trauma, and so having somebody else out there that says, this is what the child needs. This is what the child's experienced, to be a voice for a 6-year-old who can't otherwise explain those things. And so the foster parent's role is really important in that and in communicating that. And then the CASA volunteer can't be underestimated.
Advocating for the child is really what their role is.
The best interest. What is the best interest of this particular child?
Yeah, that's good. Would you be able to dispel any fears that someone might have who's a bit resistant to opening up their homes to a foster child?
Yeah, both. It's interesting that both adoptions of kids that are coming out of foster homes and placement in foster home there's a lot of these myths, and I think there's wonderful movies that have dramatized the circumstances both for and against foster parents and all of these kinds of things. But with the training that you receive, you understand that you're receiving a child that has suffered a lot of trauma. You're receiving a child that's been exposed to things that most of us, in my life, for example, other than seeing it from the bench, I've never experienced. And so understanding how to respond to trauma and understanding how to respond to those needs is important. I don't know of a case in recent history where a foster parent has been subjected to any significant or real harm. Does that mean there haven't been some minor issues? Does it mean that I've never had an experience? Yes, there's some isolated, extraordinarily infrequent kinds of situations. But by and large, given the thousands of kids that we've had in and out of foster care, the challenges are dealing with temper tantrums, dealing with refusal to follow rules, challenges of authority, maybe some might even run away, those kinds of things that one might even encounter with a strong-willed child.
Yeah. I've got 4 kids.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I might have a couple that reflect that.
You know, and it's really, you really have to understand whether or not you have the heart for able to accept somebody into your home that is not yours and still extend that kind of a love and that kind of a compassion. And that's an extraordinary gift. And the foster parents that I know and know well, they have that gift. And I think without hesitation, they would tell you how rewarding their experiences with their children. It must be, because I'm seeing many of the same foster parents taking in more and more kids and embracing them. And I've had foster parents appear in front of me, and they just rejoice in taking in these kids and coming with them into court and telling me about their accomplishments. And again, I could probably just hold up one hand in 30 years where I could say a real significant issue with regard to a situation in the foster home has occurred such that has caused me pause. The risk isn't any greater than I think to maybe crossing one of the streets in Fort Wayne. especially when you're prepared for being someone that's able to balance kind of a law and gospel approach to dealing with a child.
Yeah, I think about the fact that you know this as a Christ follower, and I do too. That at one point we were not a part of that family,
Right.
and that as Romans tells us, we're adopted as His sons,
Right.
as daughters, and what a beautiful picture we've received already of what that looks like to be brought in and be called His own. So we have a chance to do the same with a child that desperately needs that.
And foster parents aren't alone. I mean, we don't place the child with the foster parent and say, off with you now.
Right.
And there's a lot of support. There's a lot of backup. There's regular contact by the Department of Child Services case manager. The guardian ad litem or the CASA volunteer is going to be in contact. There's other support groups within the licensing agency with other foster parents. And there's usually a foster parent specialist that works with the foster parent. So your ability to communicate the challenges that you're having with this particular child is there way before anything of any significant could occur. I think the biggest challenge for many of the foster parents beyond the emotional level and day-to-day living is all of these children need to be taken to agencies for treatment, for mental health care, and for visitation, and so it's. I don't want to paint a picture that this is easy street. It's a time-consuming commitment, but for those that feel that calling, it's not too much different than being a soccer mom or a soccer dad and running all those other places. You're just doing it for another child.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you so much for
Thank you
for your time.
accommodating me through this filming.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.